The story began with a scene from 20,000 years ago. It was shown that a man named Tao had gone hunting with his tribe to gather food for the winter. He had spotted a herd of wild buffaloes and had told his people to prepare for an attack. The tribe had slowly moved closer to the buffaloes and had attacked them when the right moment came. Everything had been going well until one of the buffaloes had suddenly started chasing Tao's son, Kada. Since it was Kada's first time hunting, he had become frightened and had tried to run away. However, the buffalo had thrown him into the air and injured him badly. It had then caught him with its horns and taken him toward a ravine. Tao had seen all of this and, in an attempt to save his son, had thrown a spear at the buffalo. But even after being injured, the buffalo had not stopped and had continued dragging Kada toward the ravine. To this point, the story had shifted to a flashback showing what had happened a week earlier, when the tribe had been preparing for the hunt and had been making different kinds of weapons. That night, Kada's mother had told Tao that he shouldn't take their son hunting because she believed he wasn't ready yet. She had said that she didn't want to lose him at such a young age. In response, Tao had explained that the winter season was coming, and if they didn't go hunting, the entire village could die of hunger. The next morning, Tao had set out with the tribe to hunt. After walking for a long time, they had reached a stone monument built in memory of their ancestors. It was part of the tribe's tradition to build a monument if someone died during a hunt. Tao and the others had continued moving forward. On the way, they had met another tribe, who were also out hunting. Both tribes had then decided to move ahead together. That evening, they had caught a wild boar. Kada had been given the responsibility to kill it. Since he had never even killed a mosquito before, it had been a huge task for him. Seeing Kada hesitate, Tao had become very disappointed. He had told Kada that if things continued like this, he would never become the leader of the tribe. Tao had added that even if he didn't want to replace him, he would have to give his place to someone else. Later that night, everyone had sat with Kada and started eating the meat they had hunted. But suddenly, they had heard the sound of a wild animal. Tao had warned everyone to be careful, but before anyone could react, a lion had attacked them and taken away a boy named Kappa. The next morning, the tribe had built a monument in memory of Kappa and continued their journey to find more prey. They had walked for hours but couldn't find anything useful, so they had decided to spend the night in a stone cave. There, Tao had drawn a star-shaped tattoo on Kada's hand. He had explained that if Kada ever got lost, he could follow those stars in the night sky to return home. It was actually a kind of map that helped lost members find their way back to the tribe. The next morning, the group had once again gone out in search of prey. After walking a little further, they had seen the footprints of some wild buffaloes. Following the tracks slowly, they had reached close to the buffaloes. As soon as they got a chance, they had attacked, and this was the moment where the story had returned to where it began. A buffalo had badly injured Kada and thrown him into a deep cave. The people of the tribe had thought that Kada must have died after falling into the cave, but when they went closer, they saw that he was still hanging on to a rock. Before they could save him, Kada's hand had slipped and he had fallen into the cave. Fortunately, he hadn't fallen to the very bottom. Instead, he had landed unconscious on a rock inside the cave. Tao had seen this and tried to go down to save his son, but the other members of the tribe had stopped him. They had told him that it was no use because no one could survive a fall from that height. Still, Tao hadn't listened to them and had kept calling out to Kada. By nightfall, Kada was still unconscious. Seeing this, Tao had finally accepted that his son was no longer alive. The next morning, the tribe had performed a farewell ritual for Kada and then left to return to their village. Hours had passed, but Kada still remained unconscious. Meanwhile, a sparrow had spotted Kada and assumed he was dead. It had tried to peck at him, but just then, Kada had regained consciousness. He had caught the bird by its neck and thrown it away. When Kada had realized he was lying alone on a rock, he had become very scared and had started shouting for help. But soon, he had understood that no one was around to hear him. Not wanting to die like that, Kada had decided to try and climb the rock. After struggling for a long time, he had managed to climb up a little, but there had been no clear way forward. Still, he hadn't given up and had continued clinging to the rock with all his strength. Luckily, it had started raining heavily. The rain had filled the deep valley below, turning it into a river. Seeing this, Kada had come up with an idea. Since he didn't know how to swim, he had guessed the depth of the water and jumped in. Soon as he hit the water, he had lost consciousness again. When he woke up, he had found himself lying on the bank of the river. He was alive, but his leg was badly injured. The fall had crushed a bone in his leg, and it was swollen so badly he couldn't move it. Using all his strength, Kada had placed his leg between two rocks to hold it in place. Then, he had taken a stick to support it and managed to climb back up to the top of the rock from where he had fallen. When he reached the top, he had broken down and started crying. Just then, he had heard strange sounds behind him. When he turned, he had seen a pack of wolves approaching. He had quickly understood that the wolves were going to attack him. To save himself, he had started climbing a nearby tree, but one of the wolves had grabbed his injured leg and pulled him down, and that moment, Kada had taken out his weapon and struck the wolf, injuring it. He had then climbed the tree and decided to stay up there for safety. Night had fallen, but the wolves still hadn't left. Kada had no other option, so he had spent the entire night sitting on a dry tree. The next morning, he had seen that the injured wolf was still lying there, but the rest of the pack had already gone. First, Kada had made a weapon because he knew that if he didn't kill the wounded wolf, the wolf might attack and kill him instead. But when he had approached the animal, he had felt sorry for it. Though he had planned to kill it, he just couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead, he had tied the wolf's mouth with a rope and decided to take it along. After walking all day, they had reached a small cave where they had spent the night. The next morning, Kada had gathered some herbs and crushed them to apply on his wound. While he was drinking water, the wolf had somehow managed to untie the rope from its mouth. Kada had been a little little afraid at first, but he had calmed himself down and gone near to offer water to the wolf. The wolf had tried to scare him by baring its teeth, but Kada had stayed calm and had still tried to give him water. Seeing this, the wolf had realized that Kada meant no harm and had settled down. Kada had cleaned the wolf's wound and applied the herbs to help it heal. That evening, Kada had hunted a rabbit and started roasting it inside the cave. The wolf had tried to snatch the rabbit from him, but Kada had scared it off and made his dominance clear by starting to eat first. The wolf had understood and quietly sat in a corner. That night, Kada had finally felt a bit of comfort. Though he hadn't eaten much himself, he had shared some food with the wolf, and for the first time, the wolf had eaten calmly, like a pet dog. Because Kada's leg was still injured, he had decided to stay in the cave for a few more days. Time had passed. Then one night, Kada had looked at the tattoos on his hand and remembered his home. He had realized that he needed to go back before the snow began to fall. The next morning, Kada had decided to leave for home. He had asked the wolf to go join his pack, but when the wolf hadn't moved, Kada had chosen to leave alone. However, after walking a while, he had noticed that someone was following him. When he turned around, he had seen that it was the wolf. Kada had thrown a stick, trying to scare the wolf away, but instead of running, the wolf had walked towards him. It was as if the wolf didn't want to act like a wild animal. Deep down, it had always wanted to be like a dog, but had become a wolf only because of its surroundings. After a while, the two of them had seen some wild pigs. The wolf had immediately chased after them to hunt, and the frightened pigs had run straight toward Kada. But instead of attacking, Kada had panicked and run away. The wolf had felt disappointed by this, and as a result, they both had to sleep hungry that night. However, with time, their bond had grown stronger. Kada had named the wolf Alpha. That evening, Alpha had spotted a rabbit. This time, he had hunted it successfully, and the two had shared the meal together. When it was time to sleep, Alpha had curled up next to Kada like a loyal companion. Days had passed as they journeyed toward their destination. Kada had slowly learned to hunt with Alpha. Their friendship had deepened with each passing day. Then winter had arrived, covering everything in snow. But neither Kada nor Alpha had given up. They had kept hunting and surviving together in the freezing cold. One day, Kada had slipped and broken his leg, falling into a frozen lake. The icy water had trapped him underneath. Alpha had tried to break the thick ice to save him, but it was too hard. Seeing no other way, Kada had quickly pulled out his knife and started smashing the ice himself. After a long struggle, he had broken through and climbed out. He had taken off his wet clothes and lit a fire to warm himself. That night, they had rested there before continuing their journey. After some time, Kada had spotted a man in the distance and felt a wave of happiness. But that joy had vanished when he saw that the man was frozen to death. Taking the man's bow and arrow, Kada had continued walking with Alpha. Later, they had been attacked by a pack of wild dogs. To escape, they had hidden inside a nearby cave. Thinking they were safe, they had rested, but they hadn't realized the cave belonged to a dangerous creature. Soon, a black panther had appeared and attacked Kada. But once again, Alpha had risked everything to protect him. Though the panther was huge and powerful, Alpha had fought back bravely. Kada had quickly taken out his bow and fired an arrow. Luckily, it had hit the panther, killing it. Kada had tended to Alpha's wounds, applying herbs and cleaning them. He had felt deeply grateful, knowing that Alpha had saved his life once again. That's why he had promised himself that he would take Alpha home. The next morning, their journey had continued. After many hours of walking, Kada had finally seen the same stone monuments shown at the beginning of the story. He knew they were close to home, wild with joy. Kada had rushed forward, but Alpha had suddenly collapsed due to her injuries. Realizing she couldn't walk anymore, Kada had picked her up in his arms and kept walking. Eventually, he had reached his village. Exhausted, he had fallen to the ground. His parents had seen him and were shocked. They had rushed to him and hugged him tightly. Before fainting, Kada had told his uncle to help Alpha. A few hours later, Kada had regained consciousness and had seen Alpha lying beside him. But there was a surprise. Alpha had given birth to a few tiny wolf pups. Kada had finally realized that Alpha wasn't just a companion, she was a mother, and she had been pregnant the entire time. Even so, she had protected him again and again during their long journey. Knowing this, Kada's love and respect for Alpha had only grown stronger. He had embraced her warmly, grateful for everything she had done.